Hello everyone and welcome back to our ConnectEO channel. I'm Marisol Castro and I'm a communication officer at CTA. I'm part of the consortium of ConnectEO project. Today we will talk about the Australian market with Daniel O'Toole, Senior Advisor of Space at AUSTRADE. Hello Daniel, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So first of all, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So as you've mentioned, my name is Daniel O'Toole. I am the Senior Advisor for the space sector at the Australian Trade and Investment Commission.
So Daniel, for those European SMEs who are watching this video, could you explain what is AUSTRADE and what do you offer to international companies?
Yeah, sure thing. So the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, or AUSTRADE for short, is the Australian government's peak organisation or agency for promoting Australian exports abroad and attracting investment. So we work with Australian companies to help them enter new international markets, and we'll also work with investors to help them understand Australia and manage the investment process. So to do that, if you're looking and interested in working with Australia or investing in Australia, AUSTRADE can help you manage your risk, help you understand the ecosystem for the particular sector you're looking at in Australia, identify key stakeholders, and also help you identify potential incentives and other avenues for support. So one of the key functions we perform is as a federation. The Trade and Investment Commission will be an honest broker for you between the state and territory governments. So each state and territory has their own separate government, their own set of incentive structures and different environments that you will operate in as a company. And AUSTRADE can help you manage your relationship with the various states and territories, so you have the best understanding of what is the most ideal location for your company to set up in.
That sounds great, and I think it's really useful for European companies who want to do business in Australia. So now I would like to focus on the Earth observation sector in Australia. Could you give us an overview?
Yes, no, it'd be my pleasure. So the Earth observation market in Australia is one of the most important sectors within the space sector as a whole. So the Australian Space Agency has identified 7 civil space priorities, and Earth observation is one of those 7, with the others being robotics and automation, communications technologies, space situational awareness, leapfrog and R&D, access to space, which is effectively launch for us, and communications and ground stations technologies. The sector as a whole is a major contributor to the Australian economy. So Australia is a very vast land, but we have a population of around 25 million people, and we're a very complex and varied environment, which means that we do need to have a strong understanding of the various changes the environment poses for us, particularly in the primary sectors like mining and agriculture, but also for city planning and other areas in smart cities. So Earth observation is a major focus area for the government, but also industry, who use a lot of services. And the Australian Space Agency last year released their Earth observation from space roadmap, which actually identified that the Earth observation sector as a whole contributed around $283 million in value to the Australian economy. So it's got a very strong need within the general economy, but there's also a very strong focus within government as well. And we'll talk about it more, but the Australian government has a number of different programs, both from the research standpoint, research and development standpoint, but also major procurements that are aimed at providing new Earth observation platforms to help us de-risk our environmental challenges around things like water management, climate change, bushfires, and also looking at different capabilities for defence and other areas, and then pilot projects through research consortia. There's a lot of companies who are specialising in those areas as well. So there's a range of different segments of Earth observation that are of interest to the broader economy and the government.
Great. So in your opinion, in this sector, what are the main stakeholders in Australia, and how can SMEs look for synergies there?
So there are a range of different stakeholders. The Australian Space Agency is obviously a very important stakeholder for Earth observation. They are the peak agency for providing direction for the space sector. But there's also other stakeholders within government. So the CSIRO, which is the Australian government's chief research organisation. So it's the Commonwealth Science, and yes, if you're familiar with the CSIRO. And then there's the Bureau of Meteorology, which is also a major stakeholder. They utilise a lot of satellite data for their purposes. And you've got Geoscience Australia as the kind of key civil agencies that are concerned with Earth observation. Then, of course, there is the Department of Defence as well, which has their own interests in Earth observation. Separately, from a research and development standpoint, there's also the SmartSat CRC. They're a very important stakeholder. They often partner with these other agencies I've just mentioned to pilot new projects and fund early or mid-stage research.
Okay, yes, I think all of these stakeholders are really important for all of SMEs who want to develop their projects there. So regarding funding opportunities, recently you presented some programs that you have at AUSTRADE for Earth observation companies in Australia in a ConnectEO webinar. So could you give us just a summary of these opportunities?
Yes, of course. So there are a range of different areas of focus or opportunities for Earth observation companies. For smaller stage companies, one of the nearer term opportunities will be the International Space Investment Initiative. The Australian Space Agency has just announced an extension of this. It was a fund that was previously run to promote space projects between Australian and international partners. It's not specifically Earth observation, but given the priority level of Earth observation, it's one of the areas that will likely end up being a focus again. So that'll be a financial year 22-23. So our financial year begins from the 1st of July until June 30. So that's more for your earlier stage or smaller projects. There are also other research and development projects. So the SmartSat CRC have a program called Eye in the Sky. It seeks to develop indicative architecture of an end-to-end all-source information broadcast system that helps planners, emergency services, and the public also plan into the future. The SmartSat CRC is also partnering with the CSIRO on a program called Aquawatch, which is a mission to cover inland, estuarine, and near coastal water bodies in Australia, and to globally facilitate the science and measurement objectives, covering the risk mitigation and maintenance of major water bodies. Then more recently, we announced that the Australian government announced on the 31st of March specifically that there would be a national mission for Earth observation that the Australian Space Agency would lead the procurement for. This will be in partnership with the CSIRO and Geoscience Australia and the Bureau of Meteorology. It's a $1.2 billion program over 15 years that will aim to design and build 4 new satellites in Australia for Earth observation. So that's the largest major funding program that's been announced, on the civil side at least. Then finally, the other program I mentioned was Defence Project 799, which is a 2-phase program. It's ISR, so intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. This was leading into a 2nd phase project now, where they're exploring and scoping the development of a Earth observation constellation for the Department of Defence. But the details of this are still to be confirmed.
Great. You explain these programs in the webinar. So for all of you who want to know more, the webinar is available on ConnectEO website. And to finish with the interview, Daniel, I would like to ask you what other opportunities are there in Australia for Earth observation companies beyond the government projects?
Yes, so as I mentioned before, Earth observation contributes $283 million to the economy as a whole. So I would encourage companies who are interested in Earth observation in Australia to look at the primary sector as well. One of the areas we've seen growth from space technology companies in Australia has been in supporting that primary sector. So companies who are involved in IoT technologies, for example. They help the tracking and maintenance of remote assets, and you know, for the primary sectors, and then also some of the other major industries like construction and development, planning, smart cities. These are all hungry for Earth observation data. So I would encourage companies who are looking at Australia to look at where they can contribute to these sectors as well, and where there might be customers. Because one of the things we found anecdotally at AUSTRADE when talking to Australian exporters who develop similar technologies is that COVID in particular has increased the demand for some of these technologies and capabilities, where previously people had done things a certain way and it relied on people, manpower to directly observe and manage remote assets and assess environmental changes directly, usually using sometimes seasonal workers or you know, literally in some cases having people drive to different sites across large swathes of land. COVID limited access to labor and increased openness towards new technologies, the types of which Earth observation companies and analytics can provide. So I would encourage them to look at those sectors as well.
Great. So I think there are many opportunities there in Australia. So thank you so much, Daniel, for being here with us. And that's all for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think all this information is going to be very useful for our audience, for European SMEs, especially in Earth observation sector. And I really appreciate taking your time to be here with me today again. And for those of you who wish to know more about Australia and this AUSTRADE and their opportunities, please click on the link you can find in the description box to visit their website. And thank you all, and stay tuned.